Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Waumsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome again to the WP Builds podcast. Thank you for joining us. This is episode number 212, entitled B is for Backups. It was published on Thursday the 14th of January 2020. My name's Nathan Wrigley and I'll be joined a little bit later, as I so very often am, by David Waumsley, but we'll get to that in a moment. Before then, a couple of bits of housekeeping. If you're interested in the things that WP Builds produces each week, and we do produce a fair amount of WordPress content each week, then you can find that over on the wpbuilds.com website. If you use the menu at the top of that website, you'll discover there's a link entitled Subscribe. Click that and you'll get to a page, and on that page there will be a whole load of ways that you can keep in touch with what WP Builds produces. There's an email list to sign up when we produce new podcast episodes, and there's another newsletter where you can find out about any WordPress deals that we hear about, as and when we hear about them. There's also links to our very polite and friendly Facebook group of over 2,700 WordPressers, and there's the YouTube channel, Twitter feed, and so on and so forth. Speaking of deals, if you head over to wpbuilds.com/deals, there is a list of never going away deals. You can get 20%, 30% and more off notable WordPress products. It's searchable and filterable, so wpbuilds.com/deals if you're in the market for something this time of year. Lastly, wpbuilds.com/advertise if you would like to be on the WP Builds podcast promoting your product or service, a bit like A/B split test. Do you want to set up your A/B split test in record time, like in a couple of minutes? Use your existing pages and test anything against anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part, it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder, and the WordPress block editor. You can check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. Okay, today B is for backups. You may or may not know that David Waumsley and I have embarked upon a 26 episode series, 26 being the number of letters in the alphabet, and 26 coincidentally being half of 1 year. So it's going to take us an entire year to do this because we intersperse episodes. 1 week we do an interview and the next week we do the David Waumsley and I discussion. And that's what you've got today. We're talking about backups. What do we know about WordPress backups? What solutions are there? What have we found to work and not work? Are there better ways than using plugins? What about hosted backups and so on and so forth? We really get into the weeds of backups. So if this is of interest to you, I hope that you enjoy it.
Hello, this is the second in our series of chats which we've called the A to Z or Z of WordPress, where we attempt to cover all aspects of building and maintaining sites with WordPress. So today, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's the letter B. And that stands for, Nathan?
Boulder Dash. Backups.
Yeah. Anyway, so backups. Does it get your backup?
Oh, good grief. We've plumbed new depths already. That's great. No, I'll tell you what, though, this is going to be a really interesting subject because David and I, as we always do, spend a little bit of time before we press record chatting through. And this is one where it's clear there's no right answer. In fact, I would venture to say that we don't even really know what's going on here because there's so many choices and so many ways of doing this and different things that can be done and things that can go wrong and so on.
Yeah. So should we start with who needs a backup?
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a fair place to start. My simple answer to that would be literally everybody. I don't know if you agree with that. I don't know on what level we're taking this. In other words, when we talk about a backup, are we talking about something that you possess yourself, or you're just safe in the knowledge that it is somewhere? Maybe it's not in your control, maybe it's done by a host or something like that, but everybody needs a backup. Don't let David tell you otherwise.
That's what I think. And I think even if you, as I think most people who would be new to WordPress, certainly I was like that, never even thought about it for quite some time. And luckily the hosts were there doing that, which is pretty much the case with even your lowest cost shared hosting will do a backup. But I think that's probably true now, that you need to have your own copy because hosts may let you down.
Yeah, I think that's true. It never ceases to amaze me when you read horror stories, and it's probably happened to people that both of us know, and I'm sure everybody listening can identify with this. When you hear of people who have had a calamity with their PC or laptop, the hard disk goes wrong or the computer malfunctions in some way, and all of that data is completely irrecoverable. They've got no way out of it. And of course, increasingly, you've got malware and all these horrible viruses that come in and lock your computer down in the hopes that you don't have a backup. And it seems that message hasn't even got through to general computer users, that if you want to keep your photos and you've only got them stored in one place, you need a backup of your PC, your Mac or your PC, whatever it might be. And so then trying to persuade people that their website needs a backup, especially when they're already paying for something like hosting, I think most people's assumption would be that that's just taken care of. If I'm paying you, it doesn't matter how little I'm paying you. If I'm paying you, you will have taken care of the backup and it will have been done frequently and correctly and verified and checked. And of course, as we all know, that's not actually the case, and you need to put some time into this. And it's a pretty good way of making your care plan work. I think this is one of the few things which is bulletproof as an argument. We'll take care of your website backups on a daily, weekly, whatever basis if you jump on our care plan. I think it's one of the most rock solid arguments you've got.
It is, but of course, and this is the variety we've got. We've got the people, a lot of the sites that I look after, they're not going to change. No new content, maybe for a year or more on them, pretty static. And then on the other hand, I haven't got a huge e-commerce site, or it doesn't really matter, anything that changes membership or learning management systems. I haven't got any of those, but I have got a fairly busy shop. And it needs a different approach, really, to it. It needs more regular backups. And I'm still always a little bit nervous because they're on my plan. And I'm sure even though it's written how much I will do in terms of backups, I'm pretty sure if it did go down, they'd be looking to me and thinking it's my fault. Yeah,
this is one of the issues, I think, is that we can automate all of this. We can automate the entire backup process. But the problem would arise, of course, is if something went wrong. And as we've just discovered, just before we clicked record, one of my backups, as it happens, it's of no importance that it hasn't worked. But I've just discovered that it hasn't been running for several weeks, and I hadn't really noticed it. So although you can automate everything, I think there's still a place for going in frequently and just double checking that all of this stuff is backing up and that it's being sent to the correct third parties, wherever that might be, because it does go wrong. And if you're getting paid for it to go right, I can imagine that people will be literally livid with you, especially if it is, as you said, something like an e-commerce store or what have you, where there's orders coming in all the time and they can't recover because you haven't been backing up for the last, well, in this case, 2 weeks, which would be a disaster.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the things that could put you a little bit off WordPress, because there are so many backup solutions, and obviously it's their goal in life to make you feel that you need their backup system. So they're going to put the fear of God into you if you're not backing up. But there's so many things to choose from, and backups is one of those things, because humans just go the course of least resistance on everything. I just think it's one of these things where it almost, when we talk about backups, it's something that could put people off WordPress and just think, I'll go for one of the third parties, Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, Shopify.
Right.
Because I won't even need to think about that stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I would imagine that those all-in-one solutions, and I guess WordPress.com has the same sort of feel as Wix and Squarespace. It's just being taken care of and you pay your fee. You can imagine the client who's just paid for their website only to discover that they hadn't really thought about the backups, and maybe you didn't make it quite clear enough that they need to be paying weekly, annually, whatever it might be for backups, and suddenly it's like, what? There's more. I've got to keep paying for this sort of stuff. Whereas that's just rolled into the fee on Wix and Squarespace and so on. So it is interesting, but I would say that really, it's a no-brainer. You've got to explain this to your clients and explain why it's needed. Should we actually just go through? You have a little sort of bullet-pointed list near the top of our Google Doc where you talk about kind of the whys, what's the point of it?
Oh, yeah. So why I back up? For me, I mean, probably it's first-line protection for security issues. I can just revert back to the last copy and sort out what's going on. So that's, I mean, backups aren't just that totally losing the site. I mean, they're there also as a way of being able to do some tests. Well, sometimes I'm using the backups while I'm building a site because I want the convenience of being able to revert back to something while I'm doing some very lazy testing, or I'm trying to do stuff with code that I really shouldn't touch. And I just think, yeah, I've got it for that. So there are other reasons, and duplicating, moving sites around are another reason why I need backups, as well as I keep a few backups of old clients who have left in case that they want to come back one day.
Yeah, I've got some on ice that on cold storage, if you like, that I never look at, but I, excuse me, just before I let any client go, that is the last thing I do, is just back everything up just in case that, I don't know, maybe I've handed it over to the new custodian of the website, and I just want to be sure that if something goes wrong there, I've got it, just to be, a good person, really. Just have a backup just in case something goes wrong. But this has never really happened to me. I have to confess, I've been fairly lucky. But the third of your bullet points is protection against plugin updates if something goes wrong. And whilst I understand that can happen, I've been very lucky in that I've become very cavalier now with my backups. Not backups, with my plugin updating. Essentially, I just go through the list. I use main WP. I just quickly scan through the list on a daily basis and look what plugins need updating. And then, although I never used to do this, I used to do them one site at a time. Now I just click the update all button in most cases, and I've been, touch wood, completely immune. But I think that's for many people. I'm sure something's gone wrong, or the server has died halfway through an update and things will need to go back to yesterday.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure when this is going to go out, but we have to be quite careful around the Christmas period, don't we? Because the next release is going to have another jQuery change, isn't it? That caused a few problems last time, so it'll probably be coming out around that time. Also, I think we have another issue as well. If you're upgrading to PHP 8 as well, there could be a lot of plugins that could break.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, that's an aside.
No, but it's a good point. But I think that's a good selling point for your care plan for your clients. Although we have these plugins, and the plugin architecture for WordPress is great, we are relying on third-party developers to do some work, and we're going to click update whenever they release a patch or something, but we can't be 100% sure that it's going to be compatible with everything that we've got on that website. And so we'll have backups just in case something goes wrong. Essentially, you're sort of selling an insurance policy, really, aren't you? Which is no bad thing.
Yeah, it's no bad thing. In reality, we were talking about this before. We've never really had an incident, have we?
No.
That we've needed to rely on the backup.
No, every time I've used a backup, it's because I've wanted to do it. Pretty much, I'm really struggling to think of any situation where. No, I really can't think of something where I've had to use it in cold, sweating panic.
I know, and I'm kind of disappointed because the copies I kept of old client sites go way back before I had a care plan, and I really kind of hope that site will go down and I'll come back going, we've lost our site.
I have
be the dashing hero and go.
I was going to say, you get your cape out and your superhero pose. Yeah. So one of the great things about WordPress is there's a whole bunch of different solutions for this, but one of the worst things about WordPress is that there's a whole bunch of different solutions for this. Should we just talk about, before we get into plugins, should we just talk about the different ways that we know of backing up? There's a few that we could talk about.
Our main sections really about the yes. Well, we've got the self-managed plugins, haven't we? The things that you can find on WordPress repository, or you can buy privately. Plugins you install and self-manage.
Yep.
And then we've got the hosted solutions which there's a bunch of them. Well, they're kind of hybrid, most of those, aren't they? Because they usually involve a plugin, but the service is being taken care of on that service's hosting.
Yeah. So the first situation that you're talking about, where you sort of self-manage, you've got a plugin and it kind of keeps a copy of your database and your files, but it keeps it on your own server. And you can often, with those, deploy it onto a third-party server. So I think one of our favorites is Updraft Plus. Nice, simple to use, easy plugin. You can keep a copy on your own server, which is, I guess, recommended if you wish to have easy access to it. But a strong recommendation would be to send it off somewhere else. In my case, I use Google Drive. That just seems to be ubiquitous now. All of these plugins have the option to link your Google Drive with one button, and it works. The only problem with these things is they require your server resources to be in use, and so I don't know if you do the same thing. I put them at peculiar times of the morning, like 3:06 in the morning, so that they run at the time that the site's going to be used the least.
Everybody knows 3:06. No one goes to websites.
Everybody's on the site. But
3:07. Wow, busy.
But these third-party solutions, they can. I don't quite know how they do what they do, but they can make all of this happen and not use your resources, and they can pull out your database and what have you. I don't quite know how that works. Do you?
No, it's magic.
Yeah.
But I mean, shall we talk about the two well-known ones that do that are really WordPress, of course, which is automatic via Jetpack, and that's a service, but it's not a cheap service, but they do all that, and I guess that's the solution that they are using if you're on the .com. I don't know. I'm making this stuff up now, but yeah, there's that, and then they're a kind of third party. I suppose they're still a third party as automatic, aren't they? But Blog Vault, who are kind of well known for doing a very similar thing, but also quite expensive on the. Well, they've got a range of different things. If you want the kind of incremental backups, I'm going into another conversation now that they have. They're both quite expensive, where it's really backing up every single change that's made, and which that they get the high plans. But there are other ones as well. There's such a range, isn't there? Because we've got iTheme Sync, which actually goes in with a plugin which is separate, which is Backup Buddy.
Yep.
And do you know one? Only for doing a slight bit of research for this conversation, I didn't even know this existed. That Securi, known for their security work, they do a website backup as well. They have a service as well.
No, I didn't know that. Okay, that's interesting to know. But I guess the cost of these things is quite high, because if they are backing up every change as and when it happens, presumably there is quite an infrastructural cost for them to do that. I honestly don't know, but you'd imagine that's not a cheap thing to have going. They've got to, they've got to have everything up and running 24/7, every waking minute of every day, and making sure that it's happening. And there must be an awful lot going on their end. So I have used Blog Vault, and I really, really like it.
Yeah, they do good stuff, really. And that's a company that's quite interesting, because they do Malcare and they do also Migrate Guru, and really it's the same kind of service, isn't it? It's coming together to be this kind of one maintenance solution over time. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you can do all your updating of websites and backups and security, firewalls and all of that, and migration, as you say. It's amazing. Do you know what my preferred way of doing all of this, though? And I know this is going to sound very, very old school. Is I prefer to do it all manually. That is to say, I really still like using the command line and going in and typing in the, MySQL dump and tarring up the files. And in my experience, those things just work. PHP scripts, I think it would be fair to say, are less reliable. I'm not entirely sure how accurate that is, but I think if you're typing in commands into the command line, you've got a almost 0% chance of those things failing.
Yeah, I really admire that you look into these things. As soon as I hear something like dump or tar, my head's gone somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, there's other associations with it, but it sounds complex. Anything where it says there's a script and you put that on your server, suddenly I feel excluded from been able to do that.
The thing about it is that if you learn the one command, which is to tar up, it basically means zip the files. If you learn it, it'll take you 4 seconds to rewrite it, and you could even stick it in a text document somewhere on your desktop and just copy and paste it each time into the terminal. And you can watch the backup happen in real time on the screen. It's really great, and it takes seconds to type these commands, and then you've got a backup. And the problem is it doesn't do anything with it; it just puts it somewhere on your server. So you have created a job in that you've then got to go and put it somewhere on your desktop or wherever that might be. But it always amazes me that more people don't make use of these things, but I guess everybody just wants simplicity, right? You just want to be able to click a button and for it to work and be automated. But I do still like doing it this way.
Is this something you can't make? So you can run it on a cron job, so you don't have to manually go and do the backup. So that's solved. Would you be able to, with a script, also clear out previous copies? Or
you absolutely could do. I don't. I just go in. I've just got a task in my task scheduling system, which tells me to just go and download and delete the backups. And by downloading them, I do delete them basically at the same time. So that just empties them out, and it doesn't really take very long. I don't do it all the time. I have become much more happy using products like Updraft and BlogVault and all of that over time. But it's just it's one of those things that I learned right at the start when I was using servers and things, and I just stuck with it because it worked and I was very happy with it. And also it takes seconds. To back up a fairly large website will take 4 or 5 seconds. It's very quick. And so from that point of view, it was always easy. But I don't know why I got into that. But yes, you could run a cron job and make it back up, and you could create a script to send it somewhere else, I'm sure. But I don't do any of that. I just download it manually, But another thing that I used to do, I used to run a server and have Plesk on it, and that allowed you to do basically the same thing, and then it would send it off so Plesk is a bit like cPanel or something, so it would allow you to create those backups and then send them off to various places, another FTP server or a Amazon S3 bucket or Google Drive. It did the same thing. But honestly, I would say spend 10 minutes looking to. I might even put the commands in the show notes. I don't know, and you can just try it out for yourself. It's so simple, but it might one day just save you bacon if you need to do it, and you can't for some reason log into the back end of WordPress, but you can access the files themselves, SSH.
Would there be a situation where you could have a problem because you didn't update that script, or is it pretty much likely to run on the right server all the time?
No, I think it's I've never had a problem with it not working. And of course, you can run these commands by typing them in. So even if it didn't work, you could still get a backup where you are at this exact moment. So obviously, in most cases you want a backup because something's already gone wrong. But, if the script is working, a cron job is, you could have an external cron service making sure it worked. But in my case, I just use the server cron, which is less reliable, but there you go. And it's never not fired. It always works. I go in and like clockwork, there are my backups every time, the database and the files.
Yeah. You see, that's one of the reasons why I probably still stick with a plugin, because there's this idea in my head that things may change, plugins need to update, and they're updating for some reason. I've never understood why they need to update the backup plugins. But my assumption is, because I know nothing about using a script, is that, I'm best leaving this to experts to take care of how to back up my WordPress.
Well, you see, the thing about the plugins is they're updating because of changes to PHP, or they're adding new features, or they've changed the UI on the plugin to move the buttons around and make it easier. Whereas the terminal commands, they're just part of the OS. It's a bit like on Windows or Mac OS. When you go to a file and you right click and you click, I don't know what it is on Windows, but on Mac you click and the option is duplicate. And it's just within the OS. So really what you're doing is you're using the Linux command line to carry out a feature of the operating system. But the plugins can't really, often I don't think they make use in quite the same way. I'm not going to get into that because I'm not sure exactly how these plugins work. But it's kind of fail-safe. Fail-safe. Not entirely, but I would say it's 99.99% of the time it'll work in the same way as copying and pasting on Windows will work.
Yeah. So it's all a big scam, really.
No, because it's not easy. In that, it's not hard, but it's not the sort of thing anybody would want to get into. But if you're prepared to pay your host to do this, then essentially that's the same thing, right? You're just paying somebody to make it as straightforward and as easy as possible, and that's really what these plugins do. But you've got to think that if Backup Body, which makes the claim that it was the first of its kind, what did people do before this? They must have relied on these kind of solutions, cPanel, Plesk, people typing things into the command line. We've just become a little bit reliant on nice, easy solutions in a UI which anybody can use.
Yeah, indeed. And hosting companies, I mean, that's the other one. Really, you can spend time looking there instead to see what the commitments are of those hosting companies, whether they commit to. I mean, everybody's, I think, pretty much down to the very lowest of cost shared hosting. I don't think there's any out there that don't promise a daily backup, but
no.
Does that basic promise an expectation? Or you see, I've never even looked into this. Have you? Whether any of these hosting companies make any promises? Whether they'll pay any damages if they fail to back up?
No, I confess I haven't, and I know that these kind of things probably, if it's mission critical, I suspect that you would have to look into this and make sure that it's being done. I've always just worked on the assumption that if my host is promising it, that it will work. But because both you and I have been very lucky, we haven't had to deploy the backup in anger. But you do hear, in Facebook groups and so on, you hear horrible stories of people who are devastated to find that their host's backup hasn't actually worked, and just count myself very lucky that this hasn't been the case for me. I guess I've always had a bit of a belts and braces approach to all of this stuff. So you and I both know that it's good to have multiple points of failure. So I'm copying things onto the server and then deleting those. I'm also sending them to various locations, which then ultimately find their way onto my desktop, and those backups on my desktop ultimately find their way onto another backup. So I've got backups of my backups of my backups going back for ages, which I guess if you're me, I know that there's multiple points of failure, so it doesn't really matter if one goes wrong. So I'm a bit laissez-faire about checking things, because I know that you'd have to have a lot going wrong for it to really ultimately fail. But if you are a casual user and you're on shared hosting or something like that, and your one system of backing up fails, well, you're toast, really, aren't you?
Yeah, I definitely, and again, this was low-cost hosting, very cheap it was, and I did, for a friend, I had to find the ones that were in their cPanel, and they were there, they worked really well.
Nice.
That was a relief, but it's only that, I mean, how many years have I been? 13 years or something using WordPress, nearly 14, and only one incident I can think of where I've actually
really that is
on
yeah. That's amazing. That's really amazing. Just shows how sort of reliable all this sort of stuff is. Should we get into the names of the plugins and so on that we know of in the WordPress space?
Yeah, too many of them. So we'll do the self-managed plugins. Just before we go into this, we didn't discuss this, but it's very hard to judge these plugins because some of them are doing other jobs than migrating, where some of them are, if you like, are focusing just on the backup and recovery. So yeah. Should we start with the one we've already mentioned, which is Updraft Plus, which is very popular? Mm-hmm. In a way, it's a fabulous deal. The free deal pretty much gives you everything you need, doesn't it?
Yeah,
but
really
if you want to use it as a migration tool, you need to pay for the Pro. If you want to move your site to another domain, then you'd need to pay for it or do something manual.
Yeah, the situations in which I'm using Updraft Plus, I'm only on the free version because, as you said, it does pretty much everything I want. And in my case, that is basically a daily backup of the whole thing, and it will also back up to a location. So in my case, Google Drive. That's all that I need, and it seems to work flawlessly. It really is amazing. But there are some slight drawbacks with the free version in that in my Google Drive, I just get this one folder called Updraft Plus, and I haven't got the options to segregate things by site. But as luck would have it, the free version, it appends the name of the website into every one of the file names. So as an example, the WP builds one is backup. It goes like this. It goes backup _ date _ site name _ random string .zip. And then it backs up 5 different things. It's called others, plugins, themes, the uploads directory, and then finally there's a gzipped database file as well, and it's all there. In some sense, I don't like the way it backs everything up into different sections like that. I'd rather it just backed everything up into just one giant zip file, which then upon unzipping would show me those different directories. But I can't complain. It's totally free.
Yeah. Well, Backup Buddy, I think, does that, doesn't it?
Yes, Backup Buddy enables you to take more of it's more like the command line in that it just gives you one big folder, one big zip file, and then you have to go in and I believe it also backs up the kind of the root of everything, so it backs up all of your WordPress stuff as well, whereas Updraft Plus, I don't believe it does that. I think it just gives you the stuff that you're going to need, so the plugin directory, the upload directory, and so on, because you can download WordPress again completely for free, and it's available and easy to get. Whereas I think Backup Buddy, I think it even takes a copy of WordPress as well, which is what I do when I do my my tarball that I said in the command line. I get the whole thing, so I get WordPress as well, so that I'm on the correct version and all of that kind of stuff. But it's great. It's really a great service. If you've never used Updraft, certainly check it out.
Yeah, there's another one that I rarely see mentioned, just probably our circles, but I mean, it's fairly huge, which is Back WP Up. I hardly ever get that mentioned. Again, Another freemium one, which I think pretty much would take care of all that you need. I'm just having a quick look, actually, and it seems to have 600,000 downloads on that.
So it is pretty popular. The funny thing is, I guess the reason that everybody's talking about, let's say, Updraft Plus seems to get the most mentions, I guess is because their free offering is so good. There's so many people just simply using the free offering, and then they get sort of upsold onto some of the nice to have features of the premium version, which isn't that expensive considering. And I just wonder if these other ones, maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe they don't offer quite as much on the free version. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that probably is close to the same thing. I mean, there are some that have got a different twist. So the one that caught my eye when it came out, one of the relatively newer ones, is WP Time Capsule, because of the fact that for the first time I'd seen the possibility of getting incremental backup, so backing up every moment, which Updraft Plus has added to their Pro package since. But I mean, I don't know. This is very difficult to get any evidence on any of the plugins and when they work. You know that they're doing the job of backing up something. Whether they restore well is another thing. And I think when it comes to incremental on varying servers, when you're self-managing, that must be a nightmare.
I've got to confess, I'd be very wary about that personally. The idea of the whole incremental thing. So it is the bold claim that you could literally roll back to, I don't know, the moment before somebody purchased a specific product in a WooCommerce shop. You could literally be that granular. It would have kept a backup of everything, including those mouse clicks and things like, and the cart being executed and so on.
Wow. Well, I think that's what it was trying to solve. That's the problem, isn't it, all the time? Those very busy, dynamic websites, memberships, e-commerce, and learning management systems, they can have, thousands of changes to the database in an hour, couldn't they? And that it will just keep changing as it needs to. I don't know how granular any of them claim to be, but yeah, I think I'm not sure that I've ever heard any. Well, not that anyone can really test it, but I have heard people saying that it's not always worked so well. And you're always going to hear that, I think, with any of the self-managed plugins. Backup Buddy particularly gets this a lot because it seems some people have a great experience with it, some people have a terrible experience with it, and so much seems to be dependent on the server it's on.
Yep, I've had great experiences with Backup Buddy until recently, where I was just finding that things weren't backing up. It was just failing every time. And hence, in my case, my move to Updraft Plus, which on the exact same server worked flawlessly, but Backup Buddy didn't. That's not a criticism. I'm sure if I'd contacted support at Backup Buddy, they would have probably got me sorted, but I just never did.
Huh? Interesting. Because I think we may be talking about moving to the same VPS server, and that's when my recent problem with Backup Buddy started as well. So it could be the same thing, different environments. So I think that's the problem with all of these, and you never know how well. I mean, I've certainly had I trust Updraft Plus. I use that, and I have Backup Buddy, which is doing less backups. So belt and braces with this. But I've had both fail, to recover.
Oh, what? Backup Buddy and Updraft, both of them?
But not fortunately not at the same time. So,
okay. I was going to say,
but and it's never been important, so it's not such an issue. But I've done a few tests and I have had them fail. So that's the problem, isn't it? It's like all kind of insurance; you don't know how good it is until you need to use it.
Yeah, that's the point. Okay, well that's interesting. The idea of incremental backups, as mentioned, WP time capsule. Interesting. Yeah, I've not used that, and I confess I've heard of it, but never. I don't think I've even been on their website. So, but I'd be interested to hear if anybody has actually used it and it's worked.
Should we just whiz through a few other names quickly, just to say they're out there? There's Backup WordPress, which was by human made, but it's under new ownership. But that does look like it's on its way out because it's not been updated for over a year.
Okay.
Same too as Backup by Subsistic.
I think you've got that. Subsistic.
Subsistic.
Yes. Who knows?
Put the wrong teeth in. So that's it. Yeah, that's again not been updated. A new one that's kind of appeared maybe the last 18 months has been WP Vivid.
Yeah, I've seen this. This went out on a sort of lifetime deal, didn't it?
Yeah. That's I mean, I've not tried that one. I mean, it was hard to find out details about them. They're a Chinese company, I think, and new on it. A lot of people have raved about it. A lot of people got very involved because it was a lifetime deal and did a lot of helping to shape it. But I don't know about that. But there's another one, Backup Guard, that's on Code Canyon. I never heard of, and there is WP Database Backup, which just does databases.
Well, yeah, I can see a point where you might just want to use the database if you're literally never changing your website, if it's a brochure website and you've got a backup of the files. Mind you, why would you need a backup of the database if nothing's changing? I suppose you could just be writing posts if you're not actually changing the theme in any way. Wouldn't really matter. That seems a bit edge case. I'm not sure I would endorse that. I think you need the files and the database.
Well, the interesting thing is I've made a note of some things which are not backups as such, which is WP Reset, which I think a lot of people know, which allows you to just, that really is only dealing with databases, isn't it?
I don't get that.
Way.
I don't get that plugin. Tell me what it does, because I've seen it. I've seen it everywhere. It's been on AppSumo. Loads of people talking about it. What's the point of it? I don't get what it's doing. I mean, is the whole point that it literally takes you and resets the database? In which case, wouldn't you just reinstall WordPress? I don't know what's going on.
Well, do you know what? I used the plugin quite a few times, and it's recommended if you're using one of these kind of Astra sites. You can, you might want to try one of them. It loads the full site in with the database full of all the content and everything. And if you want to try another one, you can just click WP Reset, and that's on the free version. And I actually bought the pro version of it because of I thought it would be fantastic while you're developing sites to be able to set it as it does. When you've made a change with adding in a new plugin that you're not sure about, it will do this backup of things before you did that and reset it for you. So that's really the only reason I got it. So I can see its place while you're developing sites quite handy if you're experimenting with adding lots of new stuff that you can just go back.
So does it sort of nag you? Does it sort of say before you install this new Astra site or you install this new plugin, make a backup that you can then revert to?
Yeah, well, you could just set it to when you upload a new plugin, it will do a backup for you in the background if you set it to do that. But the reset, the free version, is just literally for that situation where you've installed something and what you want to do is to clear out the whole database but leave all the plugins there.
Right, so it literally resets you to zero, the tables of a WordPress install, that's it.
Yeah, and keeps you, well, yes, it goes zero, but it keeps you logged in, so you've still got your account.
Right,
so,
right. Okay.
That's the benefit of it.
It's interesting.
It's a weird thing. And Duplicator as well, which is also often recommended as a backup plugin, is literally to do that. It's duplicate, to clone and move your sites around, but it also can be used as a backup plugin.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, that's kind of the reason in my case, I suppose, for having backups as much as anything is to be able to migrate them. And I know that you were mentioning earlier that Updraft won't allow you to take the backup on the free version and migrate that. But then there's other things like all-in-one migration, which is free up to, I think, 500 megabytes or something like that. So you can just use those instead.
Yeah, my favorite, off topic, is Migrate Guru.
Okay.
One that's linked up with the blog vault. Very fantastic.
Yes, I use that.
To just move to
I moved a site over to Kinster recently, and I think they use Migrate Guru for that whole process. I think they do.
Yeah, well, the wonderful thing is those things, again, when it's not using your hosting, it's just so reliable. It's going through their hosting, this movement, so very, very handy.
Yeah, so you're never really sort of taking one down. You've got both live at the same time, and it just sort of sucks it up to their cloud, pushes it to the new host, and once it's all there, you can just go and check it on a fake URL, and then once you've established it's all working, you flip the DNS over and you're done.
We can't miss this one as well, because people shout at us. Managed WP, that can take care of all your backups for you.
Oh, right,
as an external service.
I've never been a managed WP user, so same sort of thing. You got your one central control panel. You can back up everything over there. Okay, that's good. Yeah.
So that's it. So shall we sort of round up? And have we got any advice? What do we think is a best fit for people?
I would say that, firstly, you must have a backup. You must have multiple backups. And for me, I just take a backup of everything every day. So the entire site, files, database and all that. But I know that some other people have a different approach. If you're not uploading new images and nothing about the site is changing, why not just do the database periodically and keep the files maybe once a week or less? I don't know. But do a backup. And for me, if you've not got a budget for this, I would say go for Explore Updraft Plus and stick it into your favoured third-party solution like Google Drive or Amazon S3, something like that. It's just painless. You'll have it up and running. Yeah, Dropbox. Yeah, you'll have it up and running in 5 minutes, and you can stop worrying about it.
Yeah, that seems the easiest thing, doesn't it, for anyone coming in? I think that's its popularity there. And I think if you've got, if I had a really important, busy shop that was earning me money, then I think I would definitely be looking at things like Blog Vault or VaultPress. That I think, well, because the backups would need to be going on all the time, and I think I would like that on a separate server to the one that's serving up the site to the visitors.
Yes.
So I think I would go all in on that. But it's quite expensive. I think for one site to get the top range of that with the incremental backups, it's going to cost you somewhere around the sort of $250, or I think VaultPress is more like $300.
I guess, though, if you've got a site where there's orders coming in and this is your living, or at least a proportion of your living, it just doesn't make sense to have a cheap miserly approach to this sort of thing. You need to have it as a proper business expense and using those services that you've just mentioned. Total no-brainer. Just spend the money, stop worrying about it, have something which you know and know is going to work, and maybe just check it a few times just to see that it is working, because you don't want to be like me to discover when you log in this morning that it hasn't been backing up for 2 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, for new people who just want to build their own site with WordPress, there is a lot of options for them now. If you think that they could still, with good caching, they can have their sites running on very low cost hosting, because it's a fairly static site, so they can be serving up HTML. And if you've got something like Updraft Plus, then they can do the backups to a free Dropbox or Google Drive. So it's a pretty good setup, isn't it?
Yep, totally free, will work, and probably entirely reliable going into the future. But do back up. Don't be that person when the whole thing goes wrong that you haven't got a backup. Make sure you have, and hopefully get multiple backups of your backups until you're so confused by how many backups you've got, you tear your hair out. Right, there we go. That's it. Yeah, all right. That was a nice chat. Thanks, David.
Yep, we'll be on to the C word.
Oh,
next time.
That sounds very rude. Right, we'll look forward to that. See you later.
Okay, bye.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that. It's always fascinating to chat to David Waumsley about these things. Who knew that there were so many different ways that you could do WordPress backups? Perhaps you've tried some of these before. Perhaps some of them are new to you and you've never heard of these particular ways or plugins. If you've got an interest in commenting, please do so on the wpbuilds.com website. Find the particular post and post there, or you can join our Facebook group, wpbuilds.com/Facebook, and find the thread in there and post instead. Share it with the handle at WPBuilds as well. Be most appreciative if you feel like commenting. The WP Builds podcast was brought to you today by A/B Split Test. Do you want to set up your A/B split tests in record time? The new A/B Split Test plugin for WordPress will have you up and running in a couple of minutes. Use your existing pages and test anything against anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part is, it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder, and the WordPress block editor. You can check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. Okie dokie, we will be back next week for a podcast. This time it'll be an interview. That's Thursday, 1 p.m. UK time. Also join us for the live news that we do. It's called This Week in WordPress. That's at 1 p.m. UK time every Monday. And then we'll put that out as a sort of curated newsletter with links to all of the bits and pieces that we discuss, plus much, much more. You can find out about that at wpbuilds.com/subscribe. Okay, that's it for this week. I hope that you stay safe. I'll fade in some cheesy music and say bye-bye for now.